The words hit Simon Cowell like a sledgehammer to the soul. 7-year-old Sophia Chen stood on the Britain's Got Talent stage, her tiny voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of rejection. "Mr. Simon, everyone says you don't have a heart, but I don't have one either. Can you teach me how to grow one? Because I want to love someone so badly, but I don't know how." What happened next shattered every preconception about the entertainment world's most feared judge. Simon Cowell, the man who had built an empire on emotional detachment, broke down completely, tears streaming down his face as he faced a mirror of his own heartless existence through the innocent words of a child who had never known love. But to understand how 7 simple words from an orphaned child brought down Britain's most powerful entertainment mogul, we need to go back to where this extraordinary story began. It was a crisp October morning at the London Palladium, and Britain's Got Talent was conducting auditions that would change television history. Simon sat in his familiar position of power, that expression of calculated indifference perfectly in place, ready for another day of sorting dreams from delusions with his trademark ruthlessness. The morning had proceeded with typical efficiency. Simon had dismissed a teenage singer as forgettably mediocre, told a dance group they had all the coordination of a traffic accident, and suggested a comedian try silence. It's funnier than your material. Each critique had been delivered with Simon's signature blend of surgical precision and emotional detachment. The audience laughed nervously, the cameras captured every devastating moment, and Simon basked in his role as entertainment's most feared truth-teller. "Next up," announced the production coordinator, "we have Sophia Chen, age 7, from Manchester. She'll be performing an original poem." Simon barely glanced up from his notes. 7-year-olds reciting original poetry usually meant rhyming couplets about rainbows or puppies. He prepared himself for 3 minutes of obligatory cuteness that would require a patronizing smile and an automatic yes vote. But when Sophia Chen walked onto that stage, something immediately felt different. She moved with an unusual stillness that was unsettling in someone so young. Her long black hair hung straight around a face that was too serious, too guarded for a 7-year-old. She wore a simple gray dress that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and her dark eyes held depths of sadness that seemed impossible for someone who had barely learned to read. More striking was her posture. Not the excitement or nervousness typical of child contestants, but a defensive wariness, as if she expected rejection before she'd even begun. "Hello there," Simon said, his voice taking on the slightly warmer tone he used for very young performers. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophia Chen," she replied, but her voice carried no childish enthusiasm. It was flat, careful, as if every word had been measured for potential harm. "And you're 7 years old?" "Yes, Mr. Cowell. I live at Sunshine Children's Home in Manchester." The mention of a children's home immediately caught the audience's attention. This wasn't just another child performer. This was a foster child, and her story was likely more complex than anyone realized. "And you're going to recite a poem for us today?" Simon asked gently. "Yes, I wrote it myself. It's called Empty Chest." Amanda Holden leaned forward with interest. Alicia Dixon looked sympathetic. David Walliams was already preparing his encouraging expression. "Well, we're excited to hear it, Sophia. Whenever you're ready." Sophia positioned herself center stage, took a deep breath, and began to speak. What emerged wasn't the typical rhyming verse of a 7-year-old, but something far more sophisticated and infinitely more heartbreaking. "Inside my chest, there's empty space, where other kids have something warm. I've lived in 12 different homes, but none of them felt like where I belong. The grown-ups say I'm a good girl, but they never say that I'm loved. They feed me and clothe me and teach me things, but no one has ever hugged me just because. I watch other children with their moms and dads, and I wonder what that feeling's like. To have someone choose you, not because they have to, but because you make their heart feel bright. I don't know what love feels like. I've never had anyone to call my own. Sometimes I wonder if I'm broken, if that's why I'm always alone." By this point, the studio audience was completely silent. Several people were wiping their eyes, and Amanda Holden was openly crying. But Sophia wasn't finished. "Mr. Simon, I know you're supposed to tell me if I'm good or bad, but I have a different kind of question for you. Everyone says you don't have a heart, but I don't have one either, so maybe that's not true. Can you teach me how to grow a heart? Can you show me how to love someone? Because I want to feel what other kids feel, but I don't know how it's done." That's when Sophia asked the question that would destroy Simon Cowell's carefully constructed emotional armor. "Mr. Simon, everyone says you don't have a heart, but I don't have one either. Can you teach me how to grow one? Because I want to love someone so badly, but I don't know how." The moment those words reached Simon's ears, something unprecedented happened. Simon Cowell began to cry. Not the controlled emotion he might show during particularly moving performances, but real, uncontrolled tears that streamed down his face as 30 years of suppressed emotion erupted all at once. The studio fell into shocked silence. The cameras captured every second as Simon, who had built his reputation on being impervious to emotion, sobbed openly in front of millions of viewers. Simon tried to speak, but his voice cracked completely. More tears flowed as he stared at this tiny girl who had somehow seen straight through his facade to the emptiness beneath. Sophia watched his breakdown with the detached curiosity of someone who had learned not to expect emotional responses from adults. Are you crying because you're sad, or because you don't know how to grow a heart either? The question hit Simon like another physical blow. Through his tears, he looked at this 7-year-old girl who had spent her entire life moving from home to home, never experiencing unconditional love, and realized she was right. They were both heartless, just in different ways. I'm crying, Simon said, his voice barely audible, because you just taught me something I didn't know about myself. What did I teach you? Sophia asked with genuine curiosity. That I've been so afraid of having my heart broken that I never learned how to use it. For several minutes, Simon sat in his chair, crying openly while Sophia stood patiently on stage. The other judges didn't know what to do. The audience was transfixed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the most vulnerable moment in Simon Cowell's public life. Finally, Simon stood up and did something he'd never done in his career. He walked onto the stage, not to deliver a verdict, not to make a dramatic point, but to kneel down in front of a 7-year-old girl who had just exposed the fundamental emptiness they both carried. Sophia, he said, his voice still thick with tears, I can't teach you how to grow a heart, because I'm just learning that myself, but maybe we can figure it out together. How do we do that? Sophia asked, her defensive walls beginning to crack slightly. I think, Simon said carefully, we start by admitting that we both want the same thing. You want someone to love you, and I want to remember how to love someone. That seems like a good place to begin. For the first time since taking the stage, Sophia's expression softened slightly. Do you really want to learn how to have a heart, Mr. Simon? I do, Simon replied, and for perhaps the first time in his life he was being completely honest about his emotional needs. What happened next would be talked about for years. Simon, still kneeling on the stage, asked Sophia a question that no one expected. Would you like to come home with me tonight? Not forever, not as anything official, but just so neither of us has to be alone while we figure out how hearts work. The studio erupted, but not with applause, with gasps, with sobs, with the sound of hundreds of people witnessing something unprecedented. Simon Cowell offering his home to a child who had never known family love. Can I really? Sophia asked, her 7-year-old voice filled with hope for the first time anyone had heard. If you want to, Simon said. I have a big house that's always been empty, and you have a big heart that's never been filled. Maybe we can help each other. The legal complexities would be worked out later. The paperwork, the home studies, the official processes, all of that would come in time. But in that moment, on national television, Simon Cowell made a commitment that changed 2 lives forever. 3 months later, the paperwork was complete. Simon Cowell had officially become Sophia Chen's guardian, and Sophia had finally found her forever home. The transformation in both of them was remarkable. Simon's critiques on the show became more constructive, more focused on helping rather than destroying. He still delivered honest feedback, but it came from a place of wanting to nurture talent rather than eliminate competition. Sophia blossomed in ways that amazed everyone who knew her. The defensive, guarded child became confident and loving. She started writing happy poems, learned to laugh without reservation, and began calling Simon Daddy without any prompting from him. But perhaps the most beautiful change was in Simon himself. The man who had built his career on emotional detachment discovered that having someone to love, really love, without conditions or expectations, filled a void he hadn't even realized existed. In interviews, Simon often speaks about how Sophia saved him as much as he saved her. I thought I was rescuing a homeless child, he says, but really she rescued a heartless man. Sophia, now 10 years old, still writes poetry. But her latest poem, Full Heart, tells a very different story. Inside my chest there's warmth and light, where once there was an empty space. I have a daddy who chose me, and love written all over his face. We learn together how hearts work, mine growing bigger every day. And daddy's heart, once cold and closed, now has room for love to stay. The episode became the most watched Britain's Got Talent audition in history. Not because of any extraordinary talent, but because viewers witnessed something more powerful than performance. They saw love born from mutual recognition of emptiness. Simon and Sophia's story proved that sometimes the most broken people find each other exactly when they need healing most. And sometimes the question that changes everything isn't do you have talent, but can you teach me how to have a heart? Today, Simon Cowell is still one of television's most influential figures, but his reputation has evolved from heartless critic to protective father. And Sophia Chen Cowell is no longer the empty-hearted orphan who walked onto a stage looking for love. She's a little girl who taught the world that hearts aren't born, they're grown, and the best ones are cultivated through the simple act of choosing to love someone who needs it most. The 7-year-old who asked Simon Cowell to teach her how to have a heart had given him the greatest lesson of his life, that the heart isn't an organ you're born with or without. It's a capacity that grows every time you choose love over fear, connection over protection, and family over solitude. And sometimes all it takes is one brave child asking one honest question to transform 2 lives forever.